Hello and welcome back. Today's psychology lecture is all about social psychology. So we are going to talk about all the lovely things that help you be you as regards to the society as a whole. All those lovely social influences. I'm looking for my button over here. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. We're going to dive right into the slideshow. And from the beginning. All right. So today's lecture is all about social thinking, influence, and relationships. So first, we're going to talk a little bit about what psychologists who study social influence actually do. So they focus on the situation. They study the influences that explain why the same person acts differently in different situations. So basically, how society or the social impact, what does that look like on the individual? So Fritz Heider from 1958 was a psychologist who coined the term attribution theory. Basically, we can attribute the behavior of a person's stable, enduring traits and dispositional attribution, or we can attribute it to the situation, what we call a situational attribution. So depending on how a person thinks, feels, and behaves in any one situation, right, can be either attributed to personality and temperament or to the situation as it stands. So fundamental attribution error is that we tend to overestimate the influence of personality and underestimate the influence of situations. So if you are one who tends to be more introverted most of the time, but you get around certain people and you're a little more extroverted, that is what we call an attribution theory. So culture impacts on attribution. Eastern cultures tend to be more sensitive to the power of the situation. So they tend to adjust themselves more to situational impacts. So, or situational events or people. So they might change their temperament or the behavior, the way that they think, feel, and do things based on the situation. Western cultures tend to focus more on the individual. So really, we see a lot more in the Western culture, this value of personality, individuation. This is who I am. I'm going to remain true to myself, regardless of the situation. So the difference between culture is there. So know thyself, understand yourself. To really understand the situation, this is key to how we view a situation from another person's point of view. Our perception of the situation changes our responses. So if someone greets us kindly, we tend to respond in a kind way. Our perception of the situation shapes our attitudes towards the situation, so ourselves and others. So the way that we receive and perceive information, how we process things, the things that are coming in, right? The things people are saying to us, but not just the things or the words, but the tone, the mannerisms, all of those things, the way we perceive those really shapes our attitudes towards those. So whether or not that was the intended purpose of the one who's sending the messages. So for instance, this is often where we have communication issues. Someone intends to be very kind, and maybe their tone is something that is off-putting, right? So others perceive that as, oh, they're being sarcastic or they're being unkind. So really our perception is not what was intended. So changed attitudes changes behaviors, and changed behaviors changes attitudes. So again, we can, we've talked in several lectures already, right? The things that we think, the things that we feel, and the things that we do make up our personality and our reality. And if you modify one of those, it's going to begin to modify the other. So if you start with the behavior, then emotions start to change, thoughts start to change. If you start with the thoughts, then feelings change, behaviors change. You start with the feelings, behaviors change, and thoughts change. So kind of just obvious stuff, but you have to know yourself in order for that to make a difference. So if you want to change your mood, start with the behavior and the emotion will follow. So for instance, if you're feeling down in the dumps, perhaps notice your position. Are you slouched over? Are you looking at the ground? Are you walking really slow? So start with the behavior. If you are overall have a lack of confidence, maybe start moving your body in a way that makes you feel strong and confident. If you've got to get up in front of people, so we call it the Superman pose. So standing up straight with your arms on or your hands on your hips. So your physical being can actually change your mood, the way that you feel about yourself. And then that can actually start to slowly change your thoughts. So the foot indoor phenomenon. The tendency for people who have first agreed to a small request to comply later with a larger request. So the same people tend to be asked for favors repeatedly. Why? Because they're like, oh, they did this little thing for me, so I'm going to ask them again, and they're going to do this next little thing for me, and then they're going to do it again and again and again and again. And if you are one of those folks who constantly is being asked for favors, and that's not a horrible thing, right? Maybe you just really love volunteering or helping people out. That's totally okay. Just be careful that you're not being taken advantage of. Or if you start to feel weary, take notice of that, and perhaps some boundaries would be a good idea. All right. So role playing affects attitude. When we adopt a new role, so for college students, if you're newly married, you got a new baby, you started a new job, it initially feels like you're being totally fake because you're acting out the role. And it takes time for that role to be fully integrated and for you to master it in a way where you're like, okay, yeah, I totally got this. So we often call that imposter syndrome. So you know, and I always say we should be at the beginning, the middle, and the end of something really challenging and awesome. So that beginning part often feels like we're playing this role when really we are. Until we master it, it becomes easy, it becomes automatic, it becomes part of our expertise. So don't feel like you're weird if you're feeling a little out of the water or uh, scared, or like you're putting on a fake facade. So it's kind of redundant. Fake facade. Yeah. Okay. So moving on. Cognitive dissonance. When attitudes or beliefs do not match our actions. So not only can we think ourselves into action, we can act ourselves into a way of thinking. So, for instance, I'm a really nice guy, but I just robbed the person next door. Right. So those thoughts and those actions just don't line up. That is cognitive dissonance. So, be careful. We all have these moments, or, I really, really, really want to save money, but then spending it all too. So we've got these conflicts all the time running through our head. And I want to do this, but I'm doing this instead. Or I think I'm this, but I'm doing the opposite. So be aware of those things. Persuasion, attempting to get people to think or behave a certain way. So obviously, if you're in sales and marketing, this is exactly what you want to do. However, it can be a slippery slope for those in relationships, those in positions of authority. So just be careful. So peripheral route persuasion, attention getting cues to trigger speedy emotional based judgment. So this is advertisements with celebrities, like, kind of flashing things that we know and we like and associating them with other things. For instance, the only things coming to mind right now is like people in medications, right? Oh my gosh, I lost all this weight and this is amazing. Blah, right. And they're a celebrity and you're like, well, it worked for them and they're awesome. So I'm going to do it. And then we have what's called central route persuasion, offers evidence and arguments that trigger careful thinking. So this is more durable, long lasting, more effective, and more often retained. So when I think of this, I often think of some of our more influential, I guess, but maybe not so well known YouTubers, right? Who are like, this is, a lifestyle kind of YouTube or whatever, but it's over time. It's a period of time where you could actually see tangible change. So this can actually help a person adjust better and understand that, hey, this isn't just a quick fix. This can help me long term, kind of thing. So and one more thing about that, the more we can like repeated exposure, right, to that long-term evidence is a good thing. So to persuade, if you are one who wants to do that, if you want to be a public speaker, if you're in a position of authority, if you want to go into sales and marketing or are in sales and marketing. So you first identify shared values and goals. So what is your consumer looking for? What is your client in need of? And then appeal. So appeal to others with admirable motives. So the more positive you can make this, the better, because people generally tend to cling to hope rather than despair. Sometimes they will react based on fear, but that tends to be much more short-lived. People get exhausted with fear mongering. So if you want to appeal, you really need to appeal to admirable motives. So hope, joy, longevity, that kind of thing. Make your message vivid. So make it memorable, right? So whether it's with a catchy tune or you've got a really great story, in public speaking, we often talk about this story building, right? So we start kind of at the top of this story peak, and we're like, we started here, and then it's the dip theory, right? We come down kind of low, we kind of bring them a little bit low, and then we bring them back up at the end with a message of hope. Repeat your messages. So throughout my psychology courses, we often talk about the same concepts over and over and over again. So for anywhere from 8 to 16 weeks, they're getting the same concepts, if not every week, at least every other week. So by the end of the semester, they've actually got a really good grip on a lot of the good basic concepts of psychology. And then engage your audience in restating your message, or better yet, acting on it. So when we want to engage folks, we want to get them physically involved, throw some Play-Doh at them, let them build things. So having something to actually do or act out a skit is really, really good way to solidify certain concepts that may not be easily retained. All right, so social influence, norms. So this is just a basic descriptor here. These are understood rules for accepted and expected behavior. So norms prescribe proper behavior, how we dress, talk, interact with one another. So these are things that we learn from a very, very young age and are often modeled to us, and we just adopt them as this is how things are, right? We don't tend to think about these things. It's just what is. So conformity. Social contagion, we are pack animals. So we tend to do the same as those around us. We tend to talk, think, and act the same as our company. So if you are like, I don't necessarily like the way that I speak, think, or the things that I do, take a look at around and say, okay, who's in my circle of influence? Who's in my friend group? Who's in my school group? Who's in my work group? Who's in my family group? All of these things make a difference when it comes to conformity, because our instinct is to fit in. Our instinct is to be part of the pack so we don't get picked off and eaten, basically. So we can also attribute this to mirror neurons. So a small part of this, not all of this, but mirror neurons, this is what happens when you look at somebody who's yawning and then you yawn. So the same parts of the brain begin to light up in you when you observe somebody doing something. So if somebody else is eating, the same neurons are firing in your brain as if you were also eating. Same thing with singing, same thing with exercising, actually, although you don't get the physical benefits of actually exercising if you watch somebody exercise, but it's really neat, right? And it does kind of get us moving. So the same kind of smaller releases of the same hormones, right? So dopamine, adrenaline, all those wonderful things are making us happy and motivated. Emotions are catchy. So if you smile at somebody, they're going to smile back at you. If someone smiles at you, you're going to smile back at them, right? So we tend to grab onto each other's emotions. And so those who are more empathic, or what we call empaths, right, really tend to feel into the emotions of those who are around them. So they have to be a little more careful, have some boundaries that they don't get brought down for those who have negative emotions. And that can happen quite easily. And we tend to get lower rather than higher, rather than us bringing people up higher. So just keep that in mind. If we walk into a room and it's like, ooh, there's something, someone's not happy in here, chances are you will likely not be happy by the time you leave, rather than your mood of happiness walking in, bringing everybody else up. So just keep that in mind. So recipe of awesomeness or disaster. Oh my goodness, I'm talking so fast. All right, social contagion leads to conformity. So recipe for conformity: made to feel incompetent or insecure. So if you're belittling people, or if you're the one who's belittled, if you're in a group of at least 3 or more people, If the group in which everyone else agrees, right? If just one person disagrees, the odds are also disagreeing also disagreeing increase. So basically, if you only have one dissenting voice, then the chances of conformity are much less. So admire the group status and attractiveness. So if they've got some sort of authority, or if they're like, oh, this is an awesome sorority or fraternity, I really want to join. They've got a great reputation, that kind of thing. Have not made a prior commitment to any response. So what that means, I haven't joined any other competing group, right? This group is the one for me. Know that others in the group will observe our behavior. So if there's a level of accountability, like you better do this, or send me your progress report every week, there's going to be a heightened degree of conformity. So, and if you're from a culture that strongly encourages respect for social standards, so when it comes to, again, when we talk about Eastern versus Western cultures, right? Is it situational or individualism? So here in the Western cultures, we tend to see things more individualistically and hold on to who we are a little bit stronger. However, we've seen that dissipate quite a bit with the movement of social media and groups that have formed there. So normative social influence that leads to conformity, to avoid rejection, right? So we don't want to feel bad. Part of Maslow's hierarchy of needs, one of his basic needs, one of the ones that we call a deficiency need, is love and belonging. We need to belong to certain social groups. This includes family, friends, groups of influence, whatever that might be. But it's part of what he calls the D needs or deficiency needs, because if we're deficient in it, it leads to dysfunction and disease and early death. So we also conform to social influence to gain social approval. So, if they've got good standing or whatever, and you're like, this is a really cool group and I want to be approved of. There you go. All right. Moving on to biology. So biology is basically our genetic code, right? It includes our innate need for belonging. We really do. So genetically, we were designed and wired for relationship, for connection with others. We are pack animals, and we are safer in a pack, right, than we are on our own individuals. We get picked off by the predators. So we are prey in the grand scheme of things. Okay. So when it comes to much larger predators, lions and tigers and bears, oh my. All right. Social influence, or informational social influence. So the need for information as a source of realities. There's a lack of individual critical thinking, especially now since we have, everybody's on the internet, everybody's got social media and all this ridiculous stuff coming out on TikTok and Snapchat and Instagram and all of these things. And you don't know what necessarily is real from what is fake now, because AI has really developed in a way where it's challenging to tell whether or not this is legitimate information. So we have decided, hey, this information is being thrown at us over and over and over again. I don't have to spend my energy and get exhausted thinking critically about this or investigating whether or not this is true. I'm just going to go with the group. Okay. Easy way to generalize without expending any energy. So think COVID, trusted the information without question. And what set this into motion was the fear. But the fear really tended to only last for so long. The fear got exhausting for many people. And we started to think more critically and more as individuals, our values, our norms, our beliefs, as opposed to, why am I letting the government think for me? At least I hope that's where most people got to. So when we talk about social responsibility, and especially when it comes to experimenting, this was one of the biggest issues was Milgram's experiment. So Milgram, this was in the 1970s. What they did is Milgram decided he was going to take a bunch of college students and run this test, having the participants administer what they believed were electric shocks to another person for wrong answers. So they had one person who was labeled the teacher and then another labeled the student. And so the teacher would go into a room with a buzzer, and supposedly the student would go into another room. They couldn't see this person who was getting shocked. So what happened was, every time that this person got a wrong answer, the teacher, the college student, would give them an electrical shock. And it began, I believe, at 15 volts, and maybe it was millivolts. I don't know. We'll find out on the next slide. So what happened was, every time they got another wrong answer, they would up the voltage. And most of the students, actually, or the ones who were labeled teacher, who had the access to the shock button, continued to go under the authority of this experimenter, who said, well, he kept egging them on. You must do this. They got it wrong. These are the rules. You have to do it. So despite hearing the learner or the actor's cries of pain, many participants continued to deliver shocks, especially when the authority figure was like, yeah, you got to do it. The study revealed how ordinary people can commit harmful acts under pressure from authority. So what they discovered was that obedience was highest when the person giving the order was close at hand and was perceived as a legitimate authority figure. The authority figure was supported by a powerful or prestigious institution. So in this case, I believe it was a university. The victim was depersonalized, or they were at a distance. So they couldn't see this person who was getting shocked, but they could hear them. Okay. So they weren't right next to them. They weren't seeing what was happening. And there were no role models of defiance. So there was nobody saying, hey, whoa, this is wrong, kind of thing. Just to be very clear, there was no learner on the other side. It was just recordings. So nobody actually got hurt in that experiment, but it was still quite disturbing, to say the least, at least for the participants. So most extreme cases include people like Hitler, right? So Zimbardo in 2010, this is a quote from him: all evil begins with 15 volts. So there you go, 15 volts was where it started. I believe it went up to 450 volts. And I was only following orders. So this is Adolf Eichmann, director of Nazi deportation of Jews to concentration camps. So, seemingly small acts of evil are a slippery slope into hell. They just are. If you begin to believe these things, do these things, think a certain way, behave a certain way because authority says so, you better stop and question yourself, right? If you ever hear authority figure tell you, it's for your own good, you better really evaluate what the hell's going on. So have the courage to stand up for yourself and others. You won't be popular, but you may make a positive difference in the world. If not the whole world, then maybe in your world or somebody else's. So common terms, social facilitation. So in the presence of others, improve performance on simple or well-learned tasks, often worsen performance on difficult tasks. So when other people are watching, when it comes to performance with very simple things, right, then we tend to get better. If we are being watched and we find the task very difficult, then our performance tends to become worse. So for instance, if you're a basketball player and you never show up to practice, chances are you're going to suck worse than you ever imagined you would, right? But if you are a basketball player and you have shown up to every single practice, you are well-versed, it is automatic, the game is in you, right? It's innate. It's just part of who you are, and you got this. It's quite a simple thing for you, then you'll tend to overperform or do very well. Social loafing, this is the tendency for people in a group to exert less effort when pooling their efforts toward attaining a common goal than when individually accountable. Not just individually accountable, but we talked in one of the lectures about Vygotsky's zone of proximal development. So when you get people together in a group sort of task or project, what happens is not everyone's going to be challenged enough to actually participate. They're going to be like, I don't care. I'm not motivated to get this done. Maybe I don't have the passion for it. They're not in that zone of proximal development. They're either in the social loafing part, which is the, I'm bored. This is super easy, or I find this completely impossible and I'm going to let other people take care of this for me. Um, what we also find is we can attribute part of this to um, the Xerxes-Dotson law too. So when I am not challenged, when I am not under stress, I don't have any motivation to do this. Of course, my productivity is very low. There's got to be there's this optimal level or sweet spot of motivation, this sweet spot of challenge, right? Or what we call good stress in order for me to be very productive. So all of that really depends when we're in a group on, do I like my group members? Am I passionate about the project? What's the reward here at the end? Like, what's the motivating factors for me to actually be doing this thing with this group of people? And then if the task is deemed as too stressful, perhaps there's too much scrutiny going on, and I find it impossible or very, very challenging to do this, then my stress level is high and my productivity level is very low. So that's the Xerxes Dotson law. So de-individuation. So this is when group participation makes people both aroused to action and anonymous. So think social media. So de-individuation, I can be anonymous and be a complete jerk and show up online and call people names and say all sorts of heinous things because I'm anonymous. So this often, if you've already kind of got this in you to do it, even with your name attached to it, the fact that you can be anonymous now will definitely provoke someone sort of over the edge into, I'm going to just post whatever I want kind of thing. So what happens on social media too is that we've begun to, not just begun, but when social media even started, we were very desensitized to the thoughts, feelings, and behaviors of others. So, it's very easy to separate ourselves from thinking that other people on social media are actually people. So if they were standing next to us, we would not be thinking, feeling, or doing the same things, hopefully. So, all right. So group polarization, the enhancement of a group's prevailing inclinations through discussion within a group. So strengthens pre-existing ideas, thoughts, and beliefs. So what happens within a group, the more you talk about something, right, the bigger it becomes, the bigger it becomes, the bigger it becomes. So this actually doesn't necessarily keep things on an even keel or even in a way that we're critically thinking about things, but they become a little more extreme. And again, this strengthening of, I'm going to hold firm to my ideas, thoughts, and beliefs, because we're all feeding each other the same thing. Okay. So the internet connects like-minded people. It strengthens ideology and isolates them from other groups. So this idea that we've got this algorithm out there in every social media space, what it does is it feeds you more and more and more and more and more of what you've already been looking at. So the reason why we have seen, or one of the main reasons why we've seen such a division, not just politics, but religion, but our norms, our values, and our beliefs have become more and more separated. More and more divisive. And what's happened is because we're being fed these more extreme views over and over and over and over and over again. Okay. And it becomes very strong. And we don't necessarily head to the middle where we think, okay, am I thinking critically? Am I viewing things from the other side? Do they have a point on some of these things? We just don't even go there. Although we should. So you should do it. So groupthink, the mode of thinking that occurs when a desire for harmony overrides critical thinking. So the loudest in the group is seen as the authority, even if completely unrealistic. So this happens way too often where we've got some very extreme groups who are just like, the world's on fire. And people are like, yeah, we just want peace and harmony. So we're going to join this group, and they've got to be right because they're the loudest. They're the most passionate, so they must be right, or I want to be part of this passionate group. But it throws all critical thinking right out the window. All right, so antisocial relations. Obviously, antisocial means they're not very conducive to positive relationships. So antisocial relations include things like prejudice, a prejudgment about a group of people. We do this all the time, and it's part of our innate being for survival and reproduction, and it's been with humans since the beginning of humankind, if you will, because we have to make quick assessments about certain people, places, and things in order to maintain safety, right? So prejudice is not necessarily a bad thing. It's a bad thing if you, or a negative thing if you then attribute it to, if you go beyond that and be like, yeah, this whole group of people is blah, 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 because, just because of the way they look, because of their culture, whatever the case might be. And then you go beyond that, and then we talk about stereotypes, which is a generalization about a group. Discrimination is the negative behavior towards the group. So we start to see this progression of I'm making this quick judgment to I'm generalizing the entire group and saying this entire group is this way. And now I'm acting out based on my prejudice and stereotype thinking. So implicit and explicit bias, so we all have biases. Only when they become discriminatory do they become dangerous, right? So only when we say, okay, well, our bias towards, let's say I've got a bias towards white females. That's not a bad thing. It becomes a bad thing or a negative thing, a dangerous thing when I say only white females are the ones who count, and I'm going to go and destroy all Asian males, whatever the case might be, right? So having implicit and explicit bias, not positive or negative, on its face, right? But it becomes dangerous when you start to think in a negative way about entire groups of people and then act out on it. That's not good. Eliminate or diminish challenges and antisocial behavior through careful self-reflection and awareness. How am I thinking, feeling about this particular group? Am I generalizing it to an entire group? And am I basing my behavior? Do I have hiring practices based on my stereotypes or my prejudice? Do I have housing requirements based on my prejudice or my stereotyping? So that kind of thing. Vivid remembering or experiences associated with race or ethnicity strengthens bias. So if you've had an early experience with a different culture or with a different race, that may shape your way of thinking, feeling, and doing for the rest of your life. So taking time to sort of step back and evaluate, okay, is that based on 40 years ago, or is that based on my experience today or with this individual person? Because what happens most often is someone's got a real shitty personality, and we attribute that personality to the entire race. So that is something that we need to step back and be like, okay, is this just a jerky person, or is this a racial issue, right? What am I thinking, feeling, and doing? All right, so biology and aggression. One marker is carried by half of the human race. So we've got, males and females. The Y chromosome is carried by males. So they determine the sex of a baby, right? So we've got 23 chromosomes from mom, 23 chromosomes from dad. They get together. We've got 46 chromosomes or 23 pair. That last pair, so chromosome 45 and 46 make up the sex of the baby, right? Is this a boy or a girl? Is it XX girl or an XY boy? So in 0.001% of the population, we have what's called intersex, and it is an XXY or an XYY. Okay, so that means they have both male and female, usually sexual organs or hormones, right? Which comes from the sexual organ. So yeah. So another genetic marker is the monoamine oxidase A, so MAOA gene, which helps break down the neurotransmitters like dopamine and serotonin, but this is also known as the warrior gene. So the MAOA is known as the warrior gene. So those who are low in this tend to have more aggressive behavior or be more easily provoked into aggression. So this is why they call it the warrior gene. So if you're low in this, so what this does is when it breaks down things like dopamine and serotonin, right? You're not getting enough of dopamine and serotonin, which is the happy, feel good reward system of our body. So there's this quick jump to impulsivity and aggression when you're low in this MAOA neurotransmitter. Hormonal influences aggression, so high levels of testosterone. So when we talk about neurotransmitters, I know we talked about this a little bit in one of the lectures, is that neurotransmitters are the chemical reactions in the central nervous system. So in the brain and the spinal cord and all those lovely wires, those neurons that fire electrically, those are neurotransmitters. They're chemicals, but they're sent electrically through these neurons, right? When these chemicals are in the endocrine system or the hormonal system, right? They're hormones. So we often have a lot of the same chemicals in the nervous system as we do in the endocrine system. So in the endocrine system, we see them flowing through the fluids of our body, okay? So just wanted to make a special note of that. So when we talk about hormonal influences, these are in the endocrine system. So high levels of testosterone and low levels of this neurotransmitter MAOA. So neural influences and aggression. So there is no one spot in the brain that controls aggression. It's a complex systematic, it's rooted in survival responses. So there's actually several parts or regions of the brain that are influenced. I think I'm going to sneeze here in a minute. Okay, we're good. All right, so there's no one spot in the brain that controls aggression. We do find that those who lack usually by the time we reach the adult brain, about 28 years old-ish, right? The prefrontal cortex. So if you do a little hand model of the brain, and up here is the prefrontal cortex right around your nails and your knuckles. So for those of you who don't know the hand model of the brain, you just kind of put your hand up like a high five, fold your thumb in. There's your little limbic system, your basal ganglia, your hypothalamus, your corpus callosum, all your lovely things there. And then, of course, you've got your brainstem, medulla, the pons, midbrain up here-ish. And then when we fold this over, of course, I find it nearly impossible to do to separate those in the middle. But then we've got the two hemispheres of the brain, right? And then up here, we've got the prefrontal cortex. So in the prefrontal cortex, it's the last thing to develop, but it often is associated with impulse control, planning, decision-making. It's also where a lot of your personality and temperament resides. So we find those who have a diminished growth in the prefrontal cortex also have issues with aggression and impulse control. So I just wanted to throw that in there. So there's your little brain model. So it's great to teach to actually, I was going to say kids, but teach to college students too. So if you're in my class, you know the brain model. Okay. So parts or regions of the brain that influence or are influenced by aggression include the amygdala. So we know the amygdala is in here, right? Part of the basal ganglia area. It's just below the hippocampal region. Now, the hippocampus and the amygdala are part of the limbic system. The limbic system is associated with emotion, memory, and learning. So the amygdala is the emotional center. The amygdala is what we call the smoke detector. It lets the body know if there's danger ahead. It sends out signals for hormones to be released for fight, flight, or freeze, and most notably the adrenaline and cortisol. So we've got the emotional center involved in aggression. The thalamus is the hormone regulation. So the thalamus is like, oh my gosh, we've got to release these hormones. We've got to release all of these survival, chemicals. So, and then the medulla, which is part of what we call the primitive or reptilian brain, right? It helps to keep us, our basic functioning alive, but it's also part of our survival response. The corpus callosum, which is a fascinating structure. It actually connects the left and the right side of the brain from the inside. It's a communication center. And what happens is it kind of goes up the middle here, just a little bit, and then it fans out like a butterfly, and it communicates from the left to the right and the right to the left, and then all over the place. It's amazing. And then the prefrontal cortex, of course, here. And then the Broca's area is located in the left part of the brain in the temporal lobe. And the Broca's area is responsible for developing and conveying language. So it's my ability to speak words, which I found it difficult to do just a second ago. So the Broca's area helps us develop and convey language with meaning. So all of these are associated with aggression. So pro-social relationships. So we'll move on from antisocial to pro-social. So this is the process of becoming friends, right? So if you look up Tuckman's, I don't know that I've done the lecture on that just yet, but we probably will get to it. But Tuckman's group formation, right? So how do we, the coming together, so forming and then storming, we're kind of figuring things out, and then we go to norming. So we're like, oh, okay, well, is this do we have shared values, beliefs, and norms? Performing, what are the things that we do together? And then for groups, it's adjourning, right? What's the projected end here? Is there an end task in mind? That kind of thing. So we can apply Tuckman's to friendship formation as well, but maybe without adjourning or with adjourning. Not all friends stay friends forever. So in fact, it's a relatively rare thing. So the mirror exposure effect, this is the tendency for repeated exposure to novel stimuli to increase our liking of them. So when we're with classmates, prison mates, religious groups, Boy Scouts, whatever the case might be, if we're in close proximity and there's repeated exposure, right? We've got to be in the same classroom day after day after day. We go to the same church twice a week, so we're with the same groups, that kind of thing. You get the idea. So the more that we're around them, the more we're like, oh yeah, that one's kind of cool, even if we didn't really like them in the beginning. All right, so finding a mate. Culture tends to play a role here. Proximity, attractiveness, and similarity plays a role. So again, that proximity, oftentimes people find a mate when they're in college, high school, they work together, that kind of thing. So I know we're seeing more and more relationships formed online, but I have yet to see a whole lot of studies that have come out with the longevity, effectiveness, or I guess beneficence of forming long-term relationships through social media. So I don't know. I'll have to look that up a little, dig a little harder for that one. So those who are friends first have marriages that tend to last longer. When we classify romantic love, it is a combination of this passionate love, so a desire to be with somebody physically. It's the two-factor theory of emotion. So it starts with physical arousal, then cognitive appraisal. And cognitive appraisal is basically how you think about something, how you perceive and process information. I think physical arousal is probably pretty self-explanatory. Compassionate love. So this is deep, affectionate attachment after dopamine and serotonin leave. So passionate love. So oxytocin stays. Calm, trust, emotional bonding. So oxytocin is that attachment neurotransmitter, that attachment chemical, if you will. So I believe it is also a hormone when it's released in the endocrine system. So I have to look that one up as well. But you get the idea. So enduring love includes equity, a give and take, but each according to their need, not, hey, we're going to have equal this and equal that. That equality doesn't work. Equality is crap. Equity is where it's at, right? Each according to his need. We don't all need the same thing. So self-disclosure and positive support. So self-disclosure is that we talk things out, we have good communication, and positive support. You know what? I'm going to support you in this thing that is beneficial for you and maybe for our relationship. So that are those are the things that include for enduring love. So when we talk about social psychology, we also talk about this thing called the bystander effect. So the more people there are to witness something that is going down where someone needs help, the less likely anyone is to help. So for instance, if I drop my wallet in front of one person, they're more likely to pick it up and give it back to me. And if I drop my wallet in front of 4 people and nobody moves, chances are nobody's going to help me, right? So the same thing happened. So it was 1964. The Kitty Genovese case was the one that kicked this bystander effect thing off into an actual research of like, why the heck is this thing happening? So Kitty Genovese was a woman who was murdered close to her home, and several people heard and witnessed this thing go down, but nobody reported it. Nobody reported anything that, we're like, yeah, I heard something and I kind of knew something was going on, but maybe I thought somebody else had reported it, right? So the more witnesses there are, the less likely this is to happen. It's what we call a diffusion of responsibility, right? Well, they're not helping, they're not doing anything, so I'm not going to either. So the chances of helping are greatest when a person appears to need or deserve help. The person is in some way similar to us. The person is a woman. We have just observed someone else being helpful. We are not in a hurry. We live in a small town or a rural area. We're feeling guilty, maybe. We're focused on others and not preoccupied. So if you're walking around and on your phone all the time, chances are you're not going to be one of those who's paying attention. And we're in a good mood, right? We tend to be much more interactive with others when we are in a good mood. Social exchange theory. So social behavior is an exchange process, the aim of which is to maximize benefits and to minimize costs. So it's this give and take, tit for tat, right? This reciprocity norm, an expectation that people will help, not hurt those who have helped them, right? So I watched your dog, you're going to watch my dog. I brought you dinner, you're going to bring me dinner, that kind of thing. Social responsibility norm and expectation that people will help those needing their help. So this is all part of the social exchange theory. Basically that again, we're designed for relationship and connection, and this includes community. So this is a lot of has to do with our community. All right. So just some social psychology terms that you should know. Conflict is a perceived incompatibility of actions, goals, or ideas. So this type of conflict, especially when it comes to incompatibility of goals, right? This often breaks apart relationships, communities, group projects, you name it. So if one person's got an idea that we're going to head this way, another person's got an idea we're going to head this way, and they're part of a group, chances are the group's going to split up or not become effective at all. So the first thing you need to do if you're working with a community or a group, some sort of project or task with others, is to make sure that you've got the same goals in mind, right? And then you devise a plan on how to get there. So one of the, I think, biggest things that we have when it comes to our government is that there may be some similar goals on the left and the right, though today it doesn't appear so. It seems to be very different goals. But throughout history, there has been this consensus of these are the major things that we need to get done. However, the path in which we accomplish those goals are completely different. So that can draw a group apart, right? That can create division very quickly. Social traps, a situation in which two parties, by each pursuing their self-interest rather than the good of the group, become caught in mutually destructive behavior. Mirror image perception, so this is mutual views, often help by conflicting parties, as when each side sees itself as ethical or peaceful and views the other side as evil and aggressive. Again, you can point to our government right now. So both sides are saying the same thing about each other. And I'm like, both cannot be true. So self-fulfilling prophecy, a belief that leads to its fulfillment, right? So if you are one who's like, oh my gosh, my boyfriend's going to leave me. He's going to leave me. He's going to leave me. He's cheating on me. He's cheating on me. And you're constantly checking his phone and you're driving him crazy and you're following him to work and you're, texting everybody who has called him in the last week or whatever. And you're, my boyfriend's going to leave me. He's going to leave me. Yeah, he's going to leave your ass because you are driving him crazy, right? That is a self-fulfilling prophecy that it's going to happen because you made it happen. Okay. So superordinate goals, shared goals that override differences among people and require their cooperation. So again, if we were living in a much more how do I say this, ideal society, right? We would have shared goals that override the differences among people and require cooperation in a way to actually get there. But you have to have people strong enough to take you there in an ethical way, right? So if you have this groupthink mentality and you've got someone who's screaming at the top of their lungs, but they are insane, you don't necessarily want to follow that person and be like, yeah, we're going to override our differences and cooperate because this person is the apparent authority when really they're just nuts. Okay. So, the end, a good question to end on is, how have you been influenced by groupthink? Chances are throughout your lifetime, there have been some instances where you're like, oh, I really shouldn't have done that or thought that or felt that because of this particular group. So that is all I have for you today. I'm going to go ahead and stop the share, and I will see you next time on our psychology lectures. Bye, everybody.